Focusing on your customer experience is now more important than ever before. From product managers to marketers to UX designers to customer success managers, everyone involved in the CX management is dealing with higher customer expectations, intense competition, and more rapid customer interactions across an ever-increasing number of channels. Improving CX involves meeting customer and company needs. It's about guiding a team through research, development, and execution to maximize customer delight. Now, this varied, agile, customer-centric workflow makes customer experience management or CX management exciting and also uniquely challenging. CX challenges can range from being aligned around understanding and meeting customer expectations, setting up a consistent customer experience across all channels, and gaining buy-in for investing more heavily in existing customer experience initiatives, and a whole lot more. So could there be a better path navigating these challenges? I believe so, and I'm hoping our guest today can shed some light on that in just a moment. Hello, and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by Sproutwith.com. I'm Vinay Koshy, and our guest today is Ken Lonyai. Ken, you've got quite the resume. So let me see if I can pick out a few things. You're a thought leader on the business implications of user and customer experience, an advisor to retail and brand executives concerning UX and CX initiatives that enhance the bottom line, especially when they incorporate user-facing technologies. You're also quite proficient at interpreting signals from heuristic, qualitative, quantitative indicators and research, melding them into SWOT-based directives. You're actually the creator of the term humanized user experience and co-founder of the HUI Central in New York. In fact, it's one of the largest HUI communities, producer of numerous interactive projects utilizing multi-sensory technologies, team leader for the only kiosk project to ever win a user experience award, and your host of the podcast, and also developer of the CX Profitability Continuum, which is a concise thesis to guide commerce-focused businesses to better profitability. Like I said, I've only picked out a few things here, but I'm curious, Ken, you obviously spent a lot of time in this whole UX CX space. Was there a particularly defining moment or event that triggered this journey?
Yeah, before I answer, Vinay, I just want to say thanks for having me here. It's a wonderful podcast. I'm glad to be a part of it today. So I appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Back to your question, you were asking, is there a particular part that stands out most to me? Or I'm sorry.
Yeah. Was there a particular incident or event that triggered this journey into the whole UX space?
Sorry. No. I'll give you my little anecdote. So when I was a kid growing up, there were kids that wanted to be doctors, nurses, firefighters, lawyers. Not one kid ever said, I want to be a UX designer or product manager. I don't even think that happens today. So no, I don't think you find, maybe now there's some programs to get into UX and maybe some in product management. It's an evolution. I was one of the founders of a company way back, early days of the internet, and that evolved. And the whole way to be competitive is to create something that's valuable, have the best experience. So once the internet kind of reached, I'll call it an MVP level, a few years into its commercial existence, things just had to get better. Initially, it was the Wild West, and you just evolve into this. And we didn't even know the term UX, even though we were doing those kinds of things. And eventually we heard this term. Yeah, that's what we do. It's about the experience. I can keep going, but so the point is, you just happen to get there. To me, it's just logic.
Fair enough. And during your journey to date, I'm curious, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
I use the word logic because to me, it's just, and my wife the same way. She's a UX person, very detailed. Something's not right. Why is that button? I'm pointing to kids. Why is that button all the way up there when all the rest of the stuff is here or whatever it is? Like, you just UX people ask why, and why can't things be better? So always trying to fix the world. So it's just how it works. And it's a logic thing to me. And that's my strength.
And in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
Okay, same answer. Okay. So you mentioned the UX CX profitability continuum. So my premise, no one has proven me wrong yet, but maybe someone will, is that UX is what drives the business. And you've been working hard this year. You decide you want to treat yourself to a new car. I don't think you're going out to buy the accounting from the car manufacturer's company. You're not buying the C-suite. You're not buying the salespeople. This is not a slight on any of that. But I'm just saying you're buying the car because there's an experience in that car you want that makes it what it is. It's the look, it's the performance, it's the utility, whatever it is. So you are buying UX, and that's the premise of the UX CX profitability continuum. If you focus on UX and CX, profit will follow. If you try and shortchange that or do something different, you can spike it in the short term and get more profits, but people catch on, people aren't dumb, and it will tank in the long term.
So on the flip side of that, would you say that most companies lose focus on the whole perspective of user experience?
I don't want to say most companies, but many, sure. Because again, especially in scenarios where you hear the CEO is only there for some short amount of time, 2 years, 3 years, and they get these golden parachutes at the end. They want to just drive net profit to help themselves. But even in scenarios where that doesn't happen, when you're stuck, it's a tough economy now. What do? We could do, I call them dirty deeds. There's 5 things you can do that will increase profit but hurt UX. So for example, reducing product quality, reducing support, or just arbitrarily raising prices. And there's a couple others. So you will absolutely get more profit and lose sight. And so in the short term, and there's a little diagram on my website how that works. Yeah, companies fall for that a lot. Or other companies just don't have a good enough practice in place in their whole product organization to just grow the, again, logical way. And so they get lost as hell. But some companies get it. So I don't want to use the term most.
Mhm. The possibilities of focusing in on UX are obviously significant and can affect the bottom line. Obviously, looking at something like a car manufacturer and focusing on UX is something that's easy for most of us to digest. But in the B2B space, could you give us an example of a company that's focusing on the UX and being able to profit as a result of that focus?
Having not worked there, I imagine Google is pretty good at that. I don't think Google's the shining tower everyone says it is, but they definitely do a lot of things. And I think they do see the value of that. And people are people. So it doesn't really matter if it's B2B or B2C or B2C. In the end, there has to be some value. So maybe the values are a little different, B2B and B2C. There's definitely a lot of overlap. So I think overall they do it well. And the difference there, I'll point out, is that if you're just a free user of their free products, you don't really get support. When you are a business customer paying for it, there are levels of support there. Again, I'm not there, but I imagine because they definitely have practice. They also have, I don't know if they do, but it seems like they have more product managers than any company. So that is a part of it.
Mhm. Yeah. So would you say that it's almost an essential skill for product managers in today's world to really get a handle on the whole UX and CX side of things?
Yeah. So first of all, you gave a great intro to the topic. I don't think I can say it as well as you did. So it was fabulous. You described it. There's a term I coined called products, innovation, product management, and UX. So that when people ask me what I do, I fit in these different camps. So I use that term, but it describes the melding or cross-pollination of those 3 things. And to be a good product manager, I believe you absolutely have to think of all 3 things at once. And it's typically siloed. Innovation is an R&D team. Product people are handling product, and UX is another team. And they do work together, but I think all 3, and even engineering needs to have more of an products mindset all the time and some more overlap. That's not to say if you're the UX director and I'm the product director that I'm going to do your job, but I think the more I know about your job, and the more you know about mine, we're able to work together rather than these handoffs. And the handoffs are more of a problem than anything else. And it needs to be more collaborative, generally speaking, again, than you often see.
Mhm. And you raised an interesting point there because, at least to my mind, the most fundamental aspect of getting a handle on the whole UX CX side of things is really understanding your customers. Now,
Mhm.
a lot of companies would say that once they've achieved product market fit, they've got a handle on customer research and understanding the customers, and so they're good to go. Do you find that's often the case, or is there perhaps blind spots that they need to be aware of?
That's the theory. It's very hard to do. And I don't want to be arrogant saying, oh, I have it mastered or anything, because there's a quote attributed to Henry Ford that apparently he never said. And that is that if I ask people what they want, they tell me a faster horse. It's just a good anecdote that, yeah, you really have to coax out of people what they need, and maybe even what they logically in their mind think they need would be true. But in doing his research, you find out they're asking for something because you have some other problem in your product already. Let's say they may say, oh, I just want a button to do this. Why do we need to add another button? Maybe because our whole navigation or UI really isn't as good as we think. And instead of just gluing on another button, we need to go back and revamp the entire thing. It's very hard. I'm not a fan of focus groups. That's a typical way, just for this
Mm.
reason. You also get this thing of, I guess I'll use the term peer pressure, maybe not, because you have focus group and 60% of the group saying one thing, people start to want to just go along because it's this group mentality. So I don't like that. There's such thing as, just, man, a word just went out of my head. Contextual observation, where I'm watching someone in the context of what they're doing, and then you have them describe what they're doing and say, I'm now going to click on this, I'm going to do that. And you see what they're doing and you can see problems, hear what they're saying. So that's a good one. There's another thing like card sorting. If you're going to do navigation, really like index cards, although there's digital ways now, and create this navigation how it makes logical sense to you. And doing that with a bunch of people, you get good feedback. So I lean towards more of those things and just questioning, but it's a absolute mix of those things, a little bit of everything, and coming up with a thesis, maybe trying to prove that out, going back to the people if you have the access, see what they think, get as much feedback. It's an iteration loop for sure, but it's an imperfect science. And that's why I think it's always more qualitative than quantitative. So a lot of product managers may disagree with me, but I still think, even though there's lots of data available, in the end, you have to interpret that data can be interpreted lots of different ways, the same data. So I think these things are still more art than science. But I'm sure there's people that disagree with that. The science influences the art, and you have to take this stuff and make the best effort. And that's why we work most places in Agile now. It's the whole iteration loop, get it out there, feedback, and keep iterating.
How would you recommend that most product managers get a handle on this ability to uncover and understand customer needs? I'm sure there is an element of learning that they would pick up through courses or programs that they would undertake. But what would be your recommendation to a potential budding project manager?
I think it's just a combination. There's experience, there's learning from peers, there is more training that you can do, getting out there and just doing it. When I got in this business, I had jet black hair like you. So I don't know the business that did this to me or so yeah, I think it's a combination. So if I just got out of college and if you can get a degree in product management or UX now, let's say, that's good. Get a good background, but I think you have to work in it and learn and see how peers do things. I've learned a lot from other people. Again, I had no formal training in this. So you just learn by experience, mistakes, of course, and peers I've worked with, knowledgeable people that taught me a lot of things. So there's no one I'd think that's coming out of school today that hasn't worked, that really knows it. And that's not, again, I'm not saying anything against anyone. I think probably most professions, you still have to get in there and do it.
Mhm. And would you say that it's often helpful to have a third party involved in this whole idea of researching and understanding customers, as opposed to just having product managers or someone from the company interview their customers?
Yeah. If you're trying to work on product, I don't know if you can really go outside other than get some feedback and maybe try and find some new potential customers and see how they react to it. It's always a balance there because if you have something new, excuse me, you don't want to expose your ideas to the market until you're ready.
Mhm.
So there's this path you got to swim through, try and get the best of both worlds. But yeah, so there's this new thing I did called, if you're familiar with PRD's product requirements documents, I've modernized that so that's a holdover from waterfall. I've modernized that now for Agile. I call it uh, product value rationale. Sorry, I kept saying PRD in my head. Product value rationale. So it's in a PRD, there's a section called jobs to be done. And that's as a user, I want to some things. So that is stuff that belongs in user stories. The people that look at PRD are not looking for that detail. They're looking for the business side. So I've taken that out and rearranged it and added some new things. There's about 30 sections that are completely fluid. The idea is that you're justifying why you're doing things. There's probably very few product managers that could just blindly do anything they want without some oversight, explanation, justification. So that helps. But if you're talking comparing interpretation of feedback, again, it's a team thing internally. And you have UX researchers in a lot of companies now. But again, my experience that it's typically the product manager will say, hey, can you find out about this? Hand it off. You get some reports back, but they're hands off while that goes on. I'm talking more about this products through the process. So even doing the research, someone may hear something that doesn't, instead of going down the wrong fork of the road, can stop it sooner. So it's definitely a team thing. It's hard to get a third party that you can validate against without spilling the beans. So probably not a clear answer because I don't know if there is one.
No worries there. So uh, really, it boils down to experience, and certainly having some background with the product certainly helps from an innovation development perspective. I am, however, a little bit curious. Some of these interviews can be quite useful. I'm thinking more from a business point of view here, not just innovation, but in terms of understanding customer experiences. You talked about jobs to be done, which is a pretty useful framework in capturing the customer story from their perspective. Some companies I notice do produce case studies, and they're often written from the perspective of the company themselves. Rarely have I seen a company actually tell the story from a customer's point of view. And correct me if I'm wrong, if they're able to do that, then wouldn't it make sense to publish at least relevant parts of that story in order to attract similar-minded customers? That's one question. The other part of it is, would you say that people who have that ability to really capture that customer story are probably better off compared to most others in their ability to unpack what is important to a customer and then figure out the better solution for their needs?
To the second question, yes, definitely, because that's what I'm saying. If you understand that,
Right.
again, I have you shopping for a car. I don't know if you are, but if I don't know the car you want, then you're not going to be satisfied. If I know the car you want, either I have it to sell to you or we'll develop it or whatever. So absolutely to that. Going back to the first part, I don't think I've ever written a case study, but you make a great point. Yeah, that it's more towards the business justifying what it did than just about the customer. I guess some marketing material has stories of customers using products, but I think you make a great point. It'd be a great way to go about things for sure.
Mhm. So that's food for thought there. You also talked a little bit about the profitability continuum. I was wondering if you could expand on that and tell us how you really incorporate that into making a business case.
Yeah. So now it's with this product value rationale. I think they work together more now that I have that because a lot of the UX CX profitability continuum is this mindset of do the right thing and don't do the wrong thing. So you can reduce it to that. There's not specific steps I've ever outlined because it's really about focus on the UX and there's all kinds of UX things to do. But when you attach it to the business case and the PPR, I think they work together because if you see we're trying to create something that's going to have value to us, the business. The only way you can do that is to understand what's valuable to the customer. So it's this circular system that they go together. And again, I keep expanding my circle. So now I'm going to stick in as inner products thinking. So all these things just work together. I don't go to any type of psychiatrist or psychologist. So maybe this is just me creating all these things I think of and trying to justify it so I can save that money or something. But I think that's not the case. So a lot of it is just this approach of this circular thing. It's this iteration loop I keep referring to that focus on the UX, not just the UX team, but again, everyone that's involved. I can get an R&D team to develop something that's really cool, but not practical. So that you can't let R&D go off on their own. You have to manage their expectations of what is required. And the same with any part of the cycle of developing a product. So it's not like I can give you a list of 5 or 10 steps, do this, that, and the next thing. It's really how things are approached using the framework that's already in place. So I'm not saying companies have to change anything. I have UX researchers, I have a UX team. All I'm saying is have to keep the focus where it has to be, which is the customer, which again is to me obvious, logical, but plenty of companies stray, and integrate everyone to some degree. Again, we don't want X number of people that all do the same job. I'm not saying that at all. Just better integration, communication. I'm not saying have more meetings, just in the process of who needs to know what's going on, and everyone needs to understand why someone else is doing what they're doing. That kind of all flows together, that everyone is supporting everyone else functionally. And I use the word emotionally, better word somewhere, but just supportively so that everyone can do their roles, but it's all to this, again, customer focused solution, which often you hear user-centered design. Well, that's a UX thing. I don't touch that. That's the UX people. That's what I'm saying. That's a very bad mentality. So fixing the mentality is really a lot of it. And where it's possible, not always possible, when someone like the CEO or someone at the C levels, no, we're going to cut this stuff. Where it's possible, stand up to that and say, no, you're not seeing it killing the company. I know not everyone can do that, but where it's possible.
Terrific. You make some great points there. I'm curious, with PBO, is there a link that we could share to read up a bit more on this and your perspective or take on it?
There will be. I've been updating my website. That's the thing that's not there yet. So I have the general, but I'm also creating a template. And wow, I don't want to use you to plug my own stuff, but what we're going to do with the template is make it freely available for anyone that subscribes. You mentioned the podcast, which is going to launch within 2 weeks. Anyone that subscribes will get access to the template for free and use it however they see fit. So it's coming.
Okay. Hopefully by the time this airs, we'll have a link for it, but happy to include that in the show notes. You also talked about this idea of B2B companies often struggling with justifying best investments in terms of a tangible ROI or return on investment. It's one thing to say, but you may not be seeing the whole picture. Quite another to advise them to bridge this gap, if you will, and see the ongoing relationships between UX investments and financial gain. I'm curious, how would you advise B2B leaders in that regard?
What I said before, that these aren't robots buying, it's not automated buying, it's still people, and people need to see value. The values can be different for something that's B2B, might be more practical, might be driven more by profit. I'm trying to think of a good example, but if buying a car, you have to be somewhat practical. I'm trying to talk you into a new car. I haven't figured that out. But generally, you try and be less than practical. But if you're buying a fleet of trucks for your deliveries, you want the driver to be comfortable, but it's the value the truck brings to the business, what's going to cost to operate and insure and things like that, reliability. So there's the value is maybe shifted some, but it's still, you have to convince people are getting value in it. And also whoever's doing the buying, they don't want to be caught making a bad decision. So they need to know that their decision is sound. It's the same idea. I wouldn't call it UX in quite the same sense, but their experience of, it's really even there more CX. I always think of CX being, if you look at an egg and UX is the yolk, it's a little more on the CX because there's a whole path that is maybe more obviously important, B2B, especially when it's going through purchasing like that, especially tangible things. But it's no different. You have to have value, and the value. So if I go to, it's another example. So if you're coming to New York in the future, Vinay, I'm going to say, you got to go to this restaurant. My favorite place. I was just there again yesterday. When you come, I'm going to take you. And you might say, well, how was it? What is it? I'd say, oh, it's satisfactory. You're not going to waste time on your trip to New York going to a satisfactory restaurant. You want to go someplace that's really going to have value for you, which is taste, ambiance, the whole experience of being there. Maybe the healthiness of the food. It's the same idea. It's the perceived value is what the user experience is, whether it's something we'll call for fun that you have to eat, but you don't have to go to a nice restaurant to eat, or something more practical like buying a fleet of trucks. And that's why I think there's not too much of a difference.
Certainly. Yes, but I'm curious. We'll use the example of the car. Assuming that the B2B leaders are accepting of this idea of customer research and the insights that come from that research, they may switch over to EVs, for example, so they're producing more electric vehicles. But when it comes to things like a seat position, as in a driver would like to be slightly elevated so they can see the road and what's in front of them better, with a more comfortable seat, the door closing with a particular kind of sound, etc. Can we draw direct correlations with those things to the bottom line before actually selling a whole bunch and figuring out whether it's in state or not? Or can we maybe save a little bit by not incorporating some of those features and still produce a roadworthy car?
I think the answer lies in the UX research / marketing / sales, because, so again, we're using this. Some companies buy 1,000 trucks, and number one thing they're looking at for sure is price. And then from there, they're going to look at all the operating costs, and certainly driver comfort is much lower. I'm pretty confident in that. But if they have a RFQ out and there's 10 companies responding, or 4, whatever it is, there's competitors responding, there's going to be a list of bullets of things that you have to check off. It needs this much mileage and this much carrying capacity and et cetera, all those things. And maybe there's something there about driver comfort. We'll assume there isn't. Answer your question. If we can deliver on all those other things, but also add some driver comfort or driver safety, which you can argue is part of that, and we're either adding no cost or a small amount of cost, but that's where I say it also is somewhere between the research, sales, and marketing. If you can prove that if we reduce driver fatigue, they're going to be able to stay on the road longer or whatever is related to that. So there might be some still cost value or revenue value or savings value, because this, what we perceive as just more frivolous type of feature, this experience feature that really doesn't fit too well, might have some practical benefits. So I think you can flesh some of that out in the research, but that might be where you bring in the sales and marketing people to find the angle to make that work more. It might be less obvious than me just telling you about a great restaurant. So it could be a combination. The whole product management thing is it's a team effort. And by team, I mean across functions.
Certainly.
So, yeah. But if you have all the bullet points match all the competitors and you without any UX, you can't beat them on price. And in these scenarios, I think you're dead in the water.
Could you share perhaps a success story where you've actually been able to help a company transform its user experience, and what were the key strategies that you used to achieve that success?
Let me think, because I'm also still restricted about talking about certain things. Can we circle back to that? Because I'd have to think of an example I can talk about.
Okay, sure. Now, B2B organizations might have perhaps a more complex user journey compared to most B2C companies. How would you recommend they approach understanding and optimizing these kinds of user experiences? Especially given that there are a number of players involved in making decisions, especially buying decisions.
Again, I don't just make a distinction too much different B2B or B2C. So you're asking particularly B2B.
Yeah, it's simply because there are often more than one, there's more than one individual involved in making a buying decision.
Yeah. All right.
Really, you need to look at it from multiple perspectives as opposed to just the one buyer perspective.
Yeah, I think that's like my previous answer because you going beyond the experience in that scenario, that it
Mhm.
is a little bit of marketing and sales to bring out those bullet points that matter to each of these different buyer types. So you might have someone, go back to the truck example, someone is involved in this managing safety for their company. So they have one perspective, and that's where that comfortable seat may really be important to them. You have the accountants that just care about the money more than anything else, which is the cheapest truck we can get, and even overtime factoring maintenance. So I think it's a little hard to fully develop a product around UX, trying to satisfy those kinds of disparate roles that have very different needs or interests. Of course, you could build the most comfortable, cool truck and the driver will be happy, but the driver almost never has a seat at the table to influence those decisions. So, yeah, I see your point about the B2B with the multiple stakeholders you have to influence. I do start to think that is a little less on the UX side and just more on the sales and marketing side, but you don't want to work independently. Technically, when I've worked as product manager, you're thinking, what are the users? But when it's B2B and I have a sales team, company does, I'm always thinking the salespeople are my users because if I satisfy my salespeople, that means they are satisfying the customer and they have something they can sell. So they come back to me, yeah, this thing is selling. This is great. It's a great feature. It's only selling because it's the right thing for the customer. So I always, in my mind, give them a seat at the table, want their feedback. And they're the ones in constant conversations with prospects and existing customers. Same thing as support people always talking to existing customers. So you definitely get good feedback there rather than necessarily directly. So in answering your question here, I think it's more of a team effort there, and a product manager never can just build everything they want or everything they want when they want. So making the prioritization decision, I think particularly B2B, as you point out, those groups have to be influencers on that decision so that they have a product they can sell.
You raised some interesting points there that I'd like to dive into. I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier, which is that you really need to build on the culture of the organization in order to make it quite customer centric, not just from a service point of view, but from really understanding the customer and their needs. Having said that, what would you recommend in order to build your influence in order to be able to do that within the organization? And uh, culture usually is something that's driven by the leadership of the company. Does that mean that we need a seat at that table, or other things that we could do even if we aren't quite in the C-suite of a particular business?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you can get a seat at the table, that's great. Definitely depends
Yeah.
on size of the business. My last product manager role, I was able to speak to the CEO because it was a 350 person company. I've worked at two enterprise banks, over 200,000 people. I can tell you, never was there a chance to talk to anyone in the C-suite in those places. So answering further, I'm a little bit of a loose cannon. So if you hire me, I start on Monday. The first thing I'm going to do is find out, all right, who does what, kind of get a feel for my role where I sit. But then as soon as I get these names, I start reaching out. Hi, I'm Ken. This is what I do. I'd like to spend some time with you to learn what you do and how I can help you, and just start building the relationships and not rather of Grace. I can't think of her last name now. She was one of the pioneering women in software. She was a Navy, I'm going to get the rank wrong, high ranking Navy person. I can't think of her name. Hopefully it'll come to me. She's the one who says better or it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So I follow that. Hopefully I'll think of her name so I can give her credit. So I would follow that. Just doesn't matter what the culture is. I'd rather get in trouble for being proactive than to just sit back and say, oh, I have to fit in when I get my paycheck, and start to make these connections, show value as soon as I can. So if you're the whatever role you want to be in this scenario, what can I do for you that's going to show you the value of UX and things I can do with my team that are going to help you in your role? And it takes time. It's not going to happen in a meeting, but over time, I tend to create my own culture. If it's a company that has it, then we're just that much farther down the road. But I think if you believe in this stuff, you have to do that. Anyone that's going to hire me, if you look at the stuff I put out there, if that doesn't fit, then we shouldn't be talking, because that's how I'm going to go about this. Not going to just say, oh, what do I do next, and keep my head low. It's not going to work for my thinking.
Mhm. I'm curious as well about the intersection between AI and UX. How are you seeing companies incorporate that? There are some rather obvious applications, be it through chatbots, etc. But beyond that, how are you seeing companies apply the development of AI technology to UX?
Beyond something like chatbot or voice interface, it's probably a little hard to see that, because so there's two sides to AI. I haven't come up with the best terms yet, but there's the visible and invisible. Excuse me. So like a bank, just 1 second, please. I can use AI for fraud protection. No one's going to see that. The UX there is someone saved my information from getting stolen. I probably won't know about it. So you're going to see more tangible UX, tangible to the customer or user, on something that's got a visible side, which AI today is going to mostly be these types of new interfaces. But the biggest problem, because it's a little hard for me to say what company's doing it well. The biggest problem with something like a VUI, voice user interface, or chatbot, especially now, these LLMs, is the hallucination aspect. You can't have them saying things that aren't true or shouldn't be said. So going back, I was saying I worked at these banks. I was working for a major bank. I was a PM for consumer-facing chatbots. We were doing this old-timey technology called NLU, Natural Language Understanding, which was not old-timey until beginning of this year, really, with large language models and GPT. And you would train it for each intent that came along, transfer money or lost credit card or whatever, to recognize that. LLMs have blown that out of the water in terms of understanding. I had a conversational designer one day that the head of training asked him, give me 200 examples of each intent. And he's 200 examples. I can't do that. There's maybe 20 it can give you, and that should be enough for training. That's all unnecessary now, because the LLMs really understand things well, but they are just prediction machines. They're definitely not cognitive. They're definitely not sentient. That's a whole other thing we can go off the tracks on. But so they're great at putting together language, and they fill in the gaps. And that's where this hallucination comes in. So now I'm seeing more effort just in the last month of ways to curtail that. And if you go to I don't have to be plugging my stuff. If you go to my website, aiproductguide.com, I have a chatbot there now. It's called Innovation, and it's a combination of NLU and LLM, and it's restricted to 3 topics. And those 3 topics, of course, are innovation, product management, and UX. You'll also maybe say something about it, who it is and who I am, but it's controlled. It has the guardrails. And I'm happy if anyone can break it and let me know, because I've gotten it to the point now where it won't break. So companies need to do that, because if you do deviate, it's my long answer. If you do deviate, the UX is out the window. If my bot tells you the wrong thing and you act on it or are influenced by it, you find out that was wrong, you are not a happy customer.
Mm.
That is the number one thing there. Also, with the NLU, as I said, we'd have to train every intent, and either they're missing intents or the training's not good enough. LLMs are not perfect, but they're really good, very fast since they at least publicly came out. They're very good in a short period of time. So that's a little bit of a non-issue now, but how they respond. And then the things that back it up. So if I ask for something to be done, a lot of it is still more conversational than actionable. That's changing quickly. I call mine an artificial assistant because it's task based. It's not all there right now, but it's starting to do tasks. So getting everything right. And the other thing is the central part of experience is not necessarily difficult. It's the edge cases and breakpoints are what makes or breaks the experience. So with the AI, that hasn't changed. You have to really get that. I don't know if that's an exact answer to the question you asked.
Yeah, so my takeaway would be that certainly the training component is quite important or essential. But there's also the guardrails that you were talking about, which probably is part of the training. Applications could be numerous, but if you don't have those to get it down, so to speak, then you could run into all sorts of strife. Would that be fair?
Yeah. And pretty soon the actionable part, a lot of people now are still thrilled if you get into ChatGPT, for example, you can have these conversations. Okay, we can talk forever, but I need you to do stuff for me is the bottom line. And that's
Mhm.
where it's going to get tougher again because it has to execute. I mean, there's a lot of APIs that exist. So connecting to these APIs should make it well, but it really has to understand. This is going back to our earlier topic of understanding the customer. So if I ask for something, it really has to get that right as well, or there goes the UX again. It's definitely a step forward and the AI is evolving so fast now, but I have to get to something of value because if you're just doing Q&A and research, so it's there, but I think real quickly it's going to need to do better things. And that with the generative AI for images, you can say, give me a picture of a dog with wings flying over the city. I've done that one particularly. I've yet to be happy with the output. You got to really tweak and you can get somewhere, but there's a lot of room for improvement there to not have to spend time with engineering prompts.
Now, this has been fascinating. Would you say that there's perhaps at least a couple of areas in this whole UX customer experience space that doesn't get talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
I'll answer that more for the CX because we got people I think know their stuff. The first of all, that's word I want to use, not interplay, but the switching out of those two phrases, they are two different things. They are similar, but two different. So I was saying that CX encompasses UX. So if you think of UX as the product, let's say I want to buy some pants. So my option is buy it online, drive to the mall. But as soon as I start thinking of my options, that's when the CX starts. If I choose to drive to the mall, how far is it? What's the parking? What's the traffic? And how clean is the store? How well is it staffed? How knowledgeable are the people? So I haven't even touched a pair of pants yet. And that's all part of the customer experience. The store is not responsible for the traffic other than they do choose the locations they want to be in. So there's pluses and minuses to be standalone in a mall, et cetera. But that to me, all I care about is I want pants and I want it the easiest way for myself. I don't care about their problems. So these terms are interchanged. This is the word I want to say, and they should never be. And if I go online, there's less CX aspect there, but also after I receive the pants, how long does it take to get? So we just averted a UPS strike here. What if they went on strike and it took me a long time to get to the pants? The fact that the merchant's using UPS, if that had happened, which it didn't, I don't care. You should have found a different company to do delivery. That's not, I wanted my pants. I don't have to wait. So I sympathize with the drivers, but I need my pants. So that's still part of the CX. So it exists. And if they tear after two wearings, that's not right. I want them to stand behind it. Some companies will, some won't. So really understanding the difference there. So we could say, yeah, we do all this products and UX stuff. Let's get the CX right for the whole journey. That's what's going to bring me back. That's going to make me evangelize to my friends or whomever. So that is one thing I think is very lost between any group of people doesn't necessarily understand that. Unfortunately, some UX people don't. I think maybe most do, but some don't.
Mhm.
My best answer to your question.
Okay. Now, now, would you say that there are some sort of good practices that companies should invest in? If so, could you elaborate on that?
For product or UX or
Yeah,
any of
for product.
again, I'm horrible with checklists, do this, that, and the next thing. But one shortcoming I see often is not empowering the product manager enough. I don't think you should hire anyone you don't believe in. So if I'm in a problem with my plumbing, I don't want to hire a plumber that I think may or may not get it right. I'm hiring the plumber that I believe is going to get that done without me standing over them. Well, what are you doing? You know, I think a lot of times the product managers are hampered. They're not given the level of autonomy and support they need or freedom. So I think that is on the product side often a big issue. Making sure they have the resources available in the sense of I had an issue I won't go into, but not having enough engineers. I could have the greatest roadmap in the world. If I don't have enough engineers to build it, everything is dragged down. And then that goes back to what I call the business side of developing that is so they're working hard, they're doing great stuff, but it's not showing any business value. It's not because of me, it's because of my lack of resources. So I think that's a huge space of not a lot of product managers are frustrated because they just don't have the authority and autonomy to go together to do their job. And again, if someone's hiring someone that they don't want to give that to, then they're not hiring the right person.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. Ken, this has been very interesting. To wrap things up, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
Could be a couple of things, but I'll go back to the inner product mentality of just having everyone thinking that way all the time. And that would lead to some of the other things we talked about. Just again, no one's doing someone else's job, but just a better coordination of thinking and the why behind things. That's what that's really about. That's the start of the mental shift, I'll say, for companies that don't have it already. So maybe that.
Mhm. Okay. And if listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
There's three places. There's LinkedIn, of course, but I have two websites going. So my name, kenlonyai.com and aiproductguy.com, which is where the podcast will be. And will be on both sites, but it's on that site now. And you can ask, there's no contact form on that website. You just ask her to get in touch with me. She'll do it.
Okay. Right. We'll include links to that in the show notes. Ken, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. You guys, great questions. Vinay, I hope I answered them well for you and your listeners, but great being here. Thank you.